Hello and welcome to MEE Live. I'm Matilda Mallinson. It's Tuesday, the 24th of March, 2026. Today, did Trump just taco on Iran, or are we all being played? Since initiating war with Iran, US President Donald Trump has claimed a former president told him he wished he did what Trump did, in a conversation that all four living former presidents deny. He told a room of journalists he'd predicted 9/11 in a book that no one can find, and now he's saying this.
We've had very good discussions, very good discussions, and you have to understand, I know my whole life has been a negotiation, but with Iran we've been negotiating for a long time. And this time, they mean business.
Are they direct speaking with Iran?
A top person, don't forget.
Is that the Supreme Leader?
No, not the Supreme Leader.
And who's in control of it? Will Iran still be able to control the flow of oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By who?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control
and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is.
It follows a 48-hour ultimatum given by the 79-year-old president to Iran on Saturday, promising to obliterate Iran's power grid if Iran doesn't agree to open the Strait of Hormuz. Deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure is a war crime. In response, Iran pledged to attack its neighbour's critical infrastructure. The economy panicked, and then at the 11th hour, Trump backtracked. Reading between the typos of this late-night Truth Social post, Trump announced the US and Iran had had very good and productive conversations regarding a total resolution of our hostilities, and it said energy attacks would be postponed for 5 days as a result. Trump called these talks in-depth, detailed, and constructive. Iran says they never happened. Still, US stock markets leapt, bond yields ticked down, and Brent crude spot prices fell by 10%. They have risen back above $100 a barrel, but remain significantly lower than when Trump made his ultimatum. In reality, however, what has changed? The vital shipping lane of the Strait of Hormuz remains closed to all but 5 ships a day. In simple terms, Iran broke Trump's ultimatum and didn't face the consequences. So did Trump just taco? The adage, Trump always chickens out, was coined in reference to the president's tariff-baiting. It's a pattern that's played out across his presidency. Escalate theatrically, watch the consequences pile up, and then reverse course suddenly while claiming victory. So did Iran call Trump's bluff? Or is this all part of his bluff? MEE's Turkey Bureau Chief Ragib Solyu has been following mediation efforts. He joins us now. Ragib, welcome to MEE Live. Trump says detailed and constructive talks happened. Iran says they didn't. Who's telling the truth?
What I gather from my sources that there have been no negotiations, but more of Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt are passing messages to each parties. And I think there has been some engagements, not talks, on the Iran file. I think we all seen reports that some of the American delegates, if you may say, Stephen Witkoff is being Islamabad per American media reports, and he is expecting to meet some sort of Iranian delegation over there. But in the same time, the demands that the Americans have been pushing forward, I think they're not easy to be swallowed by the Iranians.
So these talks aren't total fiction. That makes me curious what Trump would consider constructive talks to look like. What is the US asking for in these negotiations, as far as you're aware?
These are really high bar demands that we have seen before this war started. As you know, Trump made demands on zero nuclear enrichment. He made demands on the ballistic missiles infrastructure. He made demands all sorts of things that you can imagine that involves Iran, and he has now additional demands, including joint control of Strait of Hormuz and the possibility of not having further attacks from Iran to GCC countries and their energy infrastructures. And I don't think none of these are very easy to be accepted easily to be accepted by the Iranians. I mean, they rejected these offers, excluding the Strait of Hormuz in the past. Why should they accept now all of a sudden? There has to be some sort of midway that would convince Tehran to accept them. And I don't see that that's happening. I mean, we don't know who Iran is going to send to Pakistan to hold these talks. I mean, one of the issues that you see about these talks is that the Americans are having hardship to pick amenable officials in Tehran to talk to, because they killed the senior leadership so many times, and there's been high pace of change among the top in Tehran that is, they don't really know whom to talk to. And the person they've been trying to reach out really publicly is the Iranian parliamentary speaker, who has been denying, altogether that there's been no engagement with the Americans. And I think that's not really sounding good for President Trump.
No, it's interesting because we've seen in recent and ongoing warfare, the US sort of present itself as a mediator in peace negotiations between different parties. And now it sounds like America is really presenting an aggressive set of requirements that are hindering mediation efforts by other regional actors, by Turkey, as you've just mentioned. I want to talk to you about this ultimatum that Trump presented and which he backed down from sort of at the 11th hour. He presented an ultimatum. He backed away. This makes him look weak. People are mocking him. They say Trump always chickens out. He's in over his head and he wants this war to end. Iranian state media said something different. They said Trump is buying time. Are the taco talkers being complacent? Does Trump have a long game that he's playing here?
He might have a long game because it's quite oddly, or maybe suitably for him, his deadline is ending on Friday, and we have seen open reports, including from the Wall Street Journal, is that 2,000 Marines are coming in, being deployed to CENTCOM command, Central Command, U.S. Central Command, that basically controls Middle East file. On Friday, the same day that his deadline dies out, and the same day that the markets are closing. So, as you know, there's been a lot of talk. You can see on American social media, you can see the reports, you can talk to people in Washington, which they basically, speak about how Americans are planning to seize these 3 strategic islands on the Strait of Hormuz. There's the Hark Island, as you know, which you have the Iranian energy infrastructure. So it's very clear that there are some plans already drawn out to have this, ground operation, to say, on these islands. So whether Trump is playing a ploy or he's being genuine in these talks, he's keeping his options open. And we've seen this before. As you know, there's been rounds of talks in Oman, and there was a round of talk in Geneva. And then in the same time, American military built up in the region, an armada, lots of deployments, tanker airplanes, just giving the hint that it's very easy for Americans to start a war in any time they want. And then all of a sudden, Americans basically launched those strikes on Iran. So I think we see the repetition of a similar scenario. Maybe he's being genuine in talking to Iran or trying to talk to Iran, because, as you know, this attack on Iran, its energy infrastructure, and then possible counterattacks by Iran on the GCC energy infrastructure, that will be catastrophic for the energy markets, and it will bite Trump's voters in the U.S. in terms of the gas prices, as you know. And then this is an election year. There's a midterm is coming up. So I think it might have given him some sort of a shake-up. Is like, we should maybe consider other options before taking a decision. But in the same time, it's very clear that these troops are coming up, and it's very clear that there are some other alternative plans, and this could be all buying some time for the markets and for him as well.
But it doesn't sound in that analysis like Trump is chickening out. I mean, even just a few days ago, we heard Trump say very clearly that he does not intend to go for a ceasefire.
I don't want to do a ceasefire. You don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side.
I know that Trump's language has been very volatile. Even in that window, he said, the Trumps were winding down the war, and then he did this ultimatum, and then he backtracked. But people are saying, oh yes, he's chickening out. Iran threatened to retaliate. That scared him. But it sounds like from what you're saying, none of these threats that he's made are off the table, that there are troops being maneuvered, that there has been talk of taking Kog Island, that this could actually, what the markets have been afraid of, could actually still occur.
I think it has become extremely difficult for him to declare an easy victory once the Strait of Hormuz issue came up, right? I mean, before then, he could just say, I killed Ali Khamenei, I killed all the leadership, I took out the ballistic infrastructure, I did this, I did that, and I now declare victory. But now you had the Strait of Hormuz issue, and it's just a chokehold on the energy prices and energy markets. And GCC is extremely angry. You see the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates are basically lining up, and they talk about whether they should also themselves attack on Iran to basically stop these counterattacks on their soil. So it's just becoming extremely difficult for him to just to say that, okay, I won, I'm just going to leave. So that's why this time Taco might not be happening, because he has to basically ensure this free flow of energy on the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not sure whether the Iranians would accept, as he suggested, the joint ownership of the strait. They just basically, these are our neighborhood, and Americans have nothing to do with this. And if they want the free flow of energy over Strait of Hormuz, they just need to stop attacking, and they should just stop these hostilities.
Raghib Solhu, MEE Turkey Bureau Chief, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the markets may have been partially settled by Trump's statement of de-escalation. But if they listen as closely to leaders in the Gulf, they may take a different turn. On Sunday, the UAE's foreign minister posted on X, "We will never be blackmailed by terrorists," referring to Iran. While the Gulf has said publicly it won't participate in attacks, videos verified by international journalists suggests ground missiles may have been launched from Bahrain, while Saudi Arabia just opened its air bases to US jets, which it said it wouldn't do. The kingdom's foreign minister said their patience is, quote, not unlimited. And in the early hours of Monday, just as Trump was posting on Truth Social that resolution was at hand, air defense systems were being activated across Gulf nations in the face of a fresh wave of Iranian missiles. It's hard to gauge the true impact of Iran's attacks on America's Gulf allies, as GCC states have implemented a sweeping media blackout and banned civilians and journalists from recording them. But we do know residents have been advised not to leave the house. Luxury hotels and airports have been struck, as well as oil refineries, fuel depots and desalination plants. The UAE alone has had to fend off more than 2,000 attacks. And sources in Kuwait told MEE that last night was the heaviest of the war so far. We'll go there now. Badr Musa Al-Saif is a senior fellow at Chatham House and history professor at Kuwait University. Badr, what's the current level of aggression that you're experiencing in Kuwait? Trump said resolution was close. Does it feel that way?
Matilda, good to be with you. We're entering week 4. We've had over 5,000 distinct attacks across the Gulf states, compared to only 1,000 attacks from Iran onto Israel. So it tells you where the targets are focused on, unfortunately. This is an illegal war. We didn't call for the Iranians to attack us. We didn't invite the Americans and the Israelis to attack them. That's also another illegal attack. We had a sleepless night yesterday, indeed. There were many, many drones and missiles fired at us yesterday, close to 17. Some were targeting different civilian infrastructure, power stations. Luckily, the interception rates have worked. Yet again, we've had good, robust defense systems, not only in Kuwait, I would say, even across the Gulf, which speaks to the preparations that we've had underway. And, the government has been transparent in terms of the number of interceptions, the number of missiles and drones. We're trying to live life normally to the best of our abilities. Today was the first day back to work from a long Eid holiday. We have a 30-70% workflow, meaning 30% report to work, 70 are working online. I teach at university, as you know, so I'm also teaching online. That continues to this point. Our resolve is strong. We're trying to manage as we could, but obviously we need a resolution to the issue from its roots. Everything needs to be settled at once. We can't keep going back to one war after another. This needs to be resolved, and all parties need to be involved in that resolution.
Now, in terms of that resolution, we've seen, as well as intensifying attacks on Monday, intensifying diplomatic relations across the Gulf, diplomatic efforts across the Gulf. Phone calls were held between the foreign ministers of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, Egypt, Turkey, also between Kuwait and the UK. Can you give us any update on whether the Gulf's position has changed due to recent developments? I suppose, in short, what I'm asking is, could the Gulf be dragged into this war?
The Gulf has held quite an impressive amount of restraint across it all because they realize that this is not their war and they shouldn't be fighting on anyone's behalf. We are sovereign nation states and we act accordingly. Unfortunate propaganda coming out from Iran that we are part of a US system or that we're serving the interests of the US, we invite them to reconsider such thoughts. Now, look, Kuwait and the rest of the Gulf have clung and stuck to the international rules-based order, an order that unfortunately all the aggressors and the parties to the conflict today are not abiding by, whether it's the Americans, the Israelis, or even the Iranians. And I say this because we went to the UN, we succeeded in getting a UN Security Council resolution 2817. It was co-sponsored by 136 member states, one of the highest ever co-sponsorships, and it condemns very clearly Iran's attacks on the Gulf. And there is now another draft resolution that tries to focus on safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And I say this because it comes at the backdrop, as you mentioned, Matilda, of the flurry of diplomatic activities across the Gulf. We are in it together, and we understand that we need to be united to work through this crisis. And look, at the end of the day, we also need to work with Iran. Iran is our neighbor, and it shares the borders with us. It's unfortunate that they are not living up to that neighborly relations that we aspire to. But the hopes are that eventually there is a post-war order that does bring that common peace that we're striving for.
But it's not just Iran that's not living up to its neighborly relations. Arguably, the US, a security partner of these Gulf states, has put it in a very difficult situation. I mean, is more frustration right now being felt within the region towards Iran or towards America?
Both, I would say. Look, we're being attacked by Iran directly, so that's the primary focus here, is to fend off these attacks, to defend ourselves, and they are the main source. But we're also mature enough to know that there is a bigger picture on display. And that bigger picture is basically the US, unfortunately, pulling out of two negotiated deals that were being underway with Iran through Omani mediation, both in June 2025 and just last month. And this is unfortunate. And it's unfortunate for America not to be looking at its partners for their worth. I mean, they went into the war without even notifying us or their other partners. And we made it very clear that we would be part of this unfortunate development if they decide to strike, because of the wrong assumption that Iran has about the bases in the region as seen as US bases, whereas we've always maintained that they are Gulf sovereign bases, and we invite whomever we would like for our defense partnerships, whether it be the US or otherwise. So yes, I think there is a lot of rethink and reset that needs to be done into not only our security arrangements, but our partnerships across the board to clarify further how to better deal with one another with the end goal of security, stability, and safety.
Badr Musa Al Saif, Senior Fellow at Chatham House, thank you so much for your time. Now, to look at the long-term implications for the Gulf's US partnership and future prospects, we're joined by Christian Ulrichsen, Middle East Fellow at the Baker Institute for Public Policy. Christian, welcome to MEE Live. It's great to have you. Tell us, what do you think the long-term impact of the war on Iran will be on US relations with its Gulf allies?
Well, thank you for having me. I think there will be a lot of soul searching across Gulf capitals as to whether the US is a provider of security and stability and also deterrence to Iran, or whether the US presence has, on this occasion, invited the types of attacks that the Gulf states are now facing. As your previous guest has stated, this is not a war that the Gulf states wanted. It was a conflict they had long tried to avert, knowing that they would be caught in the firing line, and feelings of frustration in Gulf capitals at having these incredibly close links with the US, but seemingly unable to leverage that influence with the White House in its own decision-making are likely to lead to at least a degree of reassessment going forward, which probably will be the most significant thinking about US Gulf relations since the 1990-91 invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, which really led to the US presence in the Gulf as we know it today.
But it must be a question that the Gulf is also asking itself, not just for the long-term future, but for immediate decisions that it's confronted with. I mean, it's facing this decision. Should it join the war? Should it continue having patience with Iran's attacks? However, if it does join the war, it becomes an open combatant with a larger rival on its doorstep. And can it really rely on the US to shield it from the consequences if that becomes the case?
Well, I think that's exactly the dilemma that officials now face. They have taken more than 3 weeks of attacks, missile attacks and drone attacks, which have caused significant damage, especially in the case of Qatar with the hit on Ras Laffan last week. Reputational image issues for Dubai as a safe haven, for capital, for tourism, for people spending time in the region, for the airlines. So yes, the decision on whether to more forcefully defend Gulf interests and potentially begin to hit back at Iran will be actively weighed in some of the capitals, but of course does then expose the Gulf states to further attacks, further intensification, when it has already been shown that the US-led security and defense umbrella has not been sufficient so far to completely penetrate or completely intercept the barrages of missiles and drones being aimed at the Gulf. And I think there's less confidence now across capitals in the Gulf states that the US has the ability, let alone the willingness to defend its Gulf partners, come what may. And certainly until now, I think there's been rising frustration at that dilemma. And we may be approaching a tipping point, especially if the President Trump's 5-day ultimatum doesn't work out.
Nevertheless, there has been escalating language from UAE, Saudi foreign ministers indicating that perhaps more offensive positions may be taken. What is the incentive for Gulf states to do this? I'm curious also, if Gulf states do join the war, what would that mean for Iran? I mean, could a US-Israeli Gulf military coalition defeat the Islamic Republic where Israel and the US have so far failed?
Well, we've seen the increase in rhetoric, especially from Saudi and UAE, and part of it, I think, maybe for domestic consumption. Clearly, people across the region are feeling extremely angry at what has happened over the last 3 weeks, angry towards Iran, but also angry towards Israel and to the US for putting them in this position. And so leaders, I think, are responding to that anger by making it clear that their own patience is beginning to wear thin. The dilemma, again, is that there were no good options necessarily for taking a more proactive and forward on assertive position to that defense. Iran is unfortunately an expert in asymmetric conflict. They've done it for decades. They have the ability, because of their proximity to the Strait of Hormuz, to deter and interrupt trade at will. And they've shown both the capability and the intent and the strategic targeting to hit anywhere in the Gulf. So unless a Gulf addition to the Israeli-US coalition can somehow take out all the missile launch areas in Iran, which 3 weeks of US attacks and Israeli attacks haven't done so, that won't necessarily help. And of course, the issue then is drones, which don't require sophisticated launch sites and can be launched almost at will. And there are thousands of those still potentially ready for deployment. So it's hard to see how an addition to the coalition will result in any material change.
You pointed there to political pressure coming from the population in the Gulf. You know, they don't necessarily want their governments to show weakness in the face of Iranian attacks. Can you just enlighten us a bit more as to what the popular sentiments are? Because while on the one hand, I imagine there's that attitude, you know, why are we not standing our ground? Is there also an extent, you know, given this war is happening alongside the devastation of Gaza, that any kind of offensive approach would be viewed domestically as support for Israel?
Well, as you say, the conflict now is coming off the backs of the 2-year war in Gaza, which also inflamed domestic opinion, not just in the Gulf, but across the Middle East and large parts of the world. And leaders, I think, are still very sensitive to any shifts in public opinion, especially in the Gulf, where part of the social contract effectively was that we'll keep you safe. But then the people don't necessarily have a direct say in some of the governing institutions. And the ability of leaderships to keep people safe is now being called into question. So I think there will be certainly more pressure for a more direct form of action against Iran. We've seen obviously a mood shift across the region in terms of how people view Iran. There will be no going back, I think, to the pre-2020 or pre-February 28th position of a rapprochement, of a de-escalation between Iran and the Gulf states that we saw from 2023 onwards. People across the region will remember for a long time what Iran has done over the last 3 weeks and counting, in the same way they did in 1990 with Iraq. And so that's something I think that leaders will take into account as they plot their next decisions.
Christian Oriksson, Middle East Fellow at the Baker Institute for Public Policy. Thank you. And for today, that is all that we have time for. But before we lose you, we would love to hear from you. Please send in your thoughts and questions to @MiddleEastEye on any social platform or email meelive@middleeasteye.net. We'll be here at 5 p.m. GMT, noon in New York, every Tuesday and Thursday. See you then.